Well, I thought it would give some focus to tomorrow's public hearing. I mean, I've made it quite clear that I don't think there's public appetite. I don't have appetite. I don't think as council has appetite to invest upwards of $200 to $300 million in facility expansion at Northlands until we can get the basic operations in hand, until we can look at conference center integration, and until we explore all the partnerships that might be necessary to make something like the arena repurpose work. So there's a lot of work to do besides just cut a check, either for debt relief or for new infrastructure. And so I thought it would be helpful to give some focus to say these are the interim steps that would need to happen for council to even consider a debt deferral, not debt relief, but just to say, look, you can hold off on the payment, you're still going to owe us, but we're going to give you some time to restructure, because Northlands is in a challenging fiscal position for a variety of reasons, related partly to concerts, but also to declining horse racing and also to the underperforming convention center. And my motion seeks to address the convention center side of things, the repurpose feasibility, and an alternative long-term development scenario besides the festival site.
Do you expect to make that exact motion, or do you think you'll see how the conversation goes and make something similar?
I think one of the councillors will make the motion, and there seems to be eagerness to make that motion from a number of councillors, which is a good sign at this stage. Someone, I think, will make that motion. I've recommended it to the group and said, look, this is for your consideration. But again, I also wanted the public to see it. I wanted Northlands to see it. I wanted the EDC, I wanted the province, all the other relevant stakeholders to be aware of this ahead of time. And again, for people who come to the public hearing tomorrow, to not only react to the reports that are before us, but also to react to a potential pathway forward. Now, that motion could get amended. It could go a couple of different directions, but having spoken about it with most members of council, I think there's good support for exploring that direction, but we'll debate it tomorrow.
Is there an appetite at the EDC to take on another convention center?
I sit on the EDC board, and so we certainly had discussions about should it become necessary in the event that Northlands winds up, which we hope is not a smooth transition. I think there's a different way to manage any kind of transition, one way or the other. Shaw goes to Northlands, Expo Center goes to EDC, or you form a new company to manage both. I've spoken at length with board and management from both organizations about that, and I think everybody understands that there's value in making the smooth transition to whatever the new reality is, and everybody's ready for a spectrum of possibilities then.
Of those three options, is there a leading one?
No, I think it's important to go into this with an open mind and to really look at best practice from other jurisdictions that we compete with in Canada and in North America, but primarily Canada. And what we'll find, the one thing I do know, is that conference centers in and of themselves do not pay for themselves. They do require public investment, as not only in their construction, but often in their operation. The reason why you do that, though, is to attract net new stays in hotels. Tourism and convention spending is considerable, and there is a measurable and sort of well-established way to figure out the economic impact of that. And I think we can perform better there. I think we can attract more events, more tourism spend, more investment in our city, and create more jobs in that process, and that we are best positioned to do that if we bring them together. But I think it's important to maintain an open mind right now about what the best holding company is for that.
And you don't get bookings overnight, so how long of a horizon are you looking at?
Well, that's one of the reasons why some interim deferral is necessary in order to understand what, if any, efficiencies can be gained on the administrative side of putting them together. There's probably some incremental gains there, but the real gains come from, rather than sort of competing and undercutting on the same high school grad, we're talking about, okay, we're going to put the grad here because we're going to bring in a new ag trade show or a food science trade show to the other venue, which is new travelers to Edmonton rather than just cannibalizing the existing market. And so there's a certain amount of race to the bottom right now versus going out there and selling our great convention centers to the world. But there is a lead time to that, to your point. There's also a lead time to dealing with one of the barriers that the Expo Center faces to competing out there, which is the presence of a hotel attached to the facility. And again, one of the reasons why the repurpose of the arena into a multi-purpose sports facility that could host some tournaments of some scale. Maybe it's 4 sheets, maybe it's 6. Again, we got to work through all those details. Is that if that helps sustain a hotel, that's very good for the convention center, which is not just new jobs at the hotel, but it's net new business. Because if you get a big trade show with 5,000-10,000 people at it, which we can accommodate, this is the largest trade show center west of Toronto, and we haven't leveraged it sufficiently. If we can get a hotel in there, we can increase its volume considerably, which will go a long way to dealing with the deficit that Northlands is currently dealing with, both operating and paying the mortgage on it. So it's not an overnight fix, but it's setting us up for a long-term, stronger economic impact when it comes to events and conventions and tourism.
Any hotel nibbles out there that you know of?
I gather as part of the request for expressions of interest that Northlands had undertaken that there was interest, and that there were some market evaluations done. That wasn't part of the scope of what Council asked City Administration to look at, so I don't have direct knowledge of any of that, but I do think that a hotel and potentially a renovation to the Coliseum LRT station to connect directly to the Expo Center and a hotel, and potentially a repurposed arena is part and parcel of a long-term successul convention center strategy that will drive stronger economic impact.
What have you been hearing so far from the community around? Because we've been hearing a bit of uncertainty with Northlands, like with the city not supporting the Northlands plan, that perhaps Northlands won't be there, and there was a lot of they got quite a bit of support from Northlands for small grants and such.
Well, I think that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to put this motion out there, was to indicate to the community that we've heard that concern too, and I don't think it's in anyone's interest in the city to allow the site to go dormant for an extended period of time. Now, if there is an interim period where, say, horse racing might run even for 1 or 2 more years as they transition, but at the end of that, there's a period of time before you would fill up that whole site with new development. And you might even need to reserve some land. This is why we need to do the area redevelopment plan. You might need to reserve some land for future civic facilities, conference center expansion in the long term, for example. So we got to study that and then understand how to make sure that the transitions to the community and the interim uses are appropriate to the neighborhood, because I wouldn't want to see a boarded up Coliseum. If it's going to be boarded up, we should tear it down and redevelop that site. And likewise with the grandstand, when horse racing is finished, the barns and the grandstand, they can't sit there vacant. They will have to be demolished or immediately repurposed into something that does have traffic, does have eyes on the street, does contribute net to neighborhood safety, because derelict facilities is in no one's interest. And so I want to make sure we give reassurance that if Council approves this motion and this course of action, that we're working very hard to avoid the facilities going dark.
We just heard the CRL could be doing exceeding expectations, I guess.